Hello, friends. This is Life and Weight Loss Coach Samantha Nielsen. I want to welcome you to our live training tonight. Thank you for joining me. It's so fun to have you here, and I am excited to share the concept of processing emotions with you tonight. So we are going to get started, but before we do, I wanted to remind you of the 3 different ways that you can participate. First and foremost, if you're here with me live and you'd like to come on camera, when I'm done with our teaching segment, you can either unmute yourself and ask to be coached. You could drop a comment into the chat box, which I'm going to start right now. Let me open that. There we go. You can see the chat box in the bottom of your screen, and you can also raise your hand electronically to let me know that you do want to come onto the camera, share an issue with me, and then we can talk through it to help you find some resolution. If you're not interested in doing a live coaching experience, then you are welcome to drop a few sentences into the chat box about a situation that might be going on in your life, and I can take the information from there and give you my best interpretation of what you're sharing and my best takeaway in how I would advise you to approach the situation. So those are your options. And then, of course, I take emails all week long from my clients who do have situations that arise, and you too are also welcome to email me if you would like. All right, I'm so excited to talk to you about processing emotions because this is something that doesn't get nearly enough time or attention. Our emotional well-being is so important to all parts of our lives. And it's just not something that's taught. It's not something that's discussed in great depth unless you kind of actively pursue it. And that's what life coaching does. It allows us to make sense of the emotions that we're experiencing, the thoughts and feelings, the actions and outcomes that exist within our lives. And then we're able to actually kind of do a deep dive on those things to understand why we feel the way we do, if it's serving us well, or if we need to change things around so we can create a better outcome for ourselves. I've said this before, and it bears worth repeating again. Coaching is not a new experience. We pay lots of money for our children to get one-on-one coaching when it comes to their sports. We pay for academic coaching when it comes to up-leveling our mathematics skills, our debate skills, preparing for the SAT or the ACT exam. And a lot of times within our musical areas of life, such as piano and voice and guitar, we pay for high-end coaching as well. So it's really not a new concept. And yet a lot of times people have hesitation in allowing themselves to take full advantage of what life coaching can do for them. What better space to get coaching in than in up-leveling your life and really learning how to tap into your potential. As I go through the teaching segment, if you have questions, I would invite you to write them down. I will provide a window of time at the end of the teaching segment where I can take some questions on the concepts and explain them further. And if you feel like you'd like to email me on the back end and discuss something privately, of course, I invite you to do that as well. Okay, with this, we're going to get started, and I would love to share my screen with you. All right, one moment. Okay, there we go. At the top of this slide, you can see that is my contact information, Samantha@samanthanielsen.com. I invite you to drop me any notes or comments that you would like some engagement with. And then also, if you're looking to have a complimentary coaching experience, my scheduling address is found at the bottom. I'd be very happy to spend an hour with you in discussing the changes that you want to see come forth in your life and how we might be able to work together. Okay, friends, on to processing emotions. Now, interestingly enough, there's a very big difference between sensations and our feelings and emotions. And sometimes people get these things confused. So I wanted to spend a few moments to kind of like sort them out and help you to see the difference because they both exist within our body and within our mindset and within our brain. But if we don't know how to like clarify the difference, sometimes we can get them confused and we can cause ourselves a lot of frustration. So let me give you a quick example of what a sensation is. A sensation is something that we experience that happens within our body and then it's communicated up to our brain. So an example of this would be, let's say that you stub your toe against a door. You have an immediate response of pain. And from that response of pain, your body sends a message up to your brain to let you know that you've suffered an injury. You're having a sensation and it's physical pain. Likewise, one of the best ones for me to use to help create a contrast is when you need to use the restroom. Your body communicates to your brain that you have a physiological need. And that's the sensation, of course, of needing to meet an immediate need, and our body is communicating to our brain. The final one is, think about when you've gone into a restaurant or a store and maybe it's just too cold. The thermostat has been set too low and you get the chills. Of course, this is our body's way of letting us know that we're too cold. And once again, the body is communicating to the brain that you physically are cold. Now, this is why it's important to understand where the sensations come from and how we receive these sensations, because our feelings and emotions work in the opposite way. Feelings and emotions are always brought on by a thought. They're always triggered by a thought. And we create our emotions because of what we're thinking. Now, let me give you a few examples here as well. And then as we go further into the teaching segment, this will probably make even more sense. Let's say that you're having the emotion of excitement and you feel excited and you kind of have that giddy feeling, maybe some butterflies in your stomach. You feel a little bit light on your feet and your eyes are shining just a little bit brighter. And you know that you're getting ready to go to a party. The reason you're feeling the emotion of excitement is because of what you're choosing to think about the party. If you've been looking forward to this party with a lot of anticipation, then some of your thoughts might be like, this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to go. Another thought might be, I'm so excited to see my friends. I have the best friends ever. And so your brain is sending a thought down into your body, which then generates the emotion. Let's say that you're getting ready to take an exam and maybe you get like the cold, sweaty palms and you start to sweat just a little bit and maybe your stomach feels a little bit like upset, kind of like when you have eaten something that's not quite right. This is because your brain is sending a thought from your brain down into your body to create that emotion of nervousness. Oftentimes when we're nervous, we have a physiological response. But the nervousness truly is there because of what you're choosing to believe. And especially if you aren't well prepared for the exam. So if you're going into the exam and you haven't done your homework and you're not feeling confident, nervousness would be the emotion that would present. On the contrast, if you're going into an exam and you have done your homework, then you may have the opposite feeling of nervousness, which could be confident. And you would have a totally different set of physiological responses because of the thought, I'm really ready for this test. I've got this made. It's going to be easy. So when you have those kinds of thoughts, it totally triggers your body in a different way. Now, the next two examples are a perfect contrast of how our thoughts create our emotions. Maybe you're feeling peaceful because you hear really pleasant background music in your home. And the music that's playing is very soothing. The reason you feel the emotion of peace is because you're thinking, I really like this music. This is so soothing. This is really inviting and calming to me. From those thoughts, you then experience the emotion and the feeling of peacefulness. Likewise, in contrast, you can also experience agitation when it comes to your background music. Let's say that maybe your 15-year-old has put on his favorite group to listen to, and it's not your favorite group. You're triggered to feel agitation because you have thoughts, this group is so annoying. I hate this music. Why does it have to be so loud and so annoying? And from having those thoughts in your mental space, it triggers the emotion of agitation. So there's the contrast between how a sensation works in our space and how an emotion works in our space. And when we understand the difference, then it empowers us to do better and also to choose better, because our thoughts truly do always trigger our emotional responses. Now in life, we always get to have a 50-50 contrast. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. We can't know joy without sadness. We can't know peace without frustration. Likewise, we can't experience pleasure without pain. And so it is with all of the emotions that present in our lives. We are always offered a 50-50 contrast, and that's just how it is. We're supposed to be able to feel the contrast because then it makes the rich and the happy and the exciting even that much better. that if we didn't understand sadness, then we couldn't appreciate happiness. And so it's important that we have experience in both of these emotions and that we don't try to avoid or resist the negative or more unpleasant emotions that come about from our human experience. As you can see from this particular slide, the contrast is just a natural part of our experience. We have to accept that we're going to have sad days. We have to accept that we're going to feel frustration, that we're going to feel disappointment. And when we can make peace with those and understand that it's part of the package, then we can handle these things better. We can have better communication within our relationships, and we can choose to feel better in the moment, even when an unpleasant emotion is in our space. It's when we try to avoid the contrast that we set ourselves up for a lot of frustration. We're not supposed to be happy all of the time. And so learning how to process the emotions and to process them effectively is really important. Now, when I think about the feelings and the feelings that are available to us as humans, I like to think of a buffet table. We have dozens and dozens of feelings available to us. Just like you see here with this picture of a buffet table. We have lots of choices available. And yet we always kind of seem to gravitate towards the ones that are most familiar and that we're most comfortable with. Most individuals are very, very challenged when it comes to identifying how they're truly feeling. And so it's important for us to become in tune with and to be able to communicate about the feelings that really exist within ourselves, within our minds and our bodies when different experiences come up. And so getting familiar with all the different emotions that are available, it's a really important skill and it's a really important learning. This is probably the perfect time for me to tell you that at the end of our course tonight, I would be so happy to email you a list of the full spectrum of emotions that are available. So if you want to take advantage of that bonus and take advantage of the reading that I'm going to make available on how to process emotions and how to identify emotions, that's going to be offered to you at the end of this teaching segment. But think about it for a moment. A lot of times people will say, "How are you doing today?" And our automatic response is, "Fine," or "Good." We don't reach for some of those other emotions that might truly describe how we're feeling in that moment. And it's just because we've become socialized this way, and it's become a matter of routine and habit. But that doesn't mean that it has to be that way all the time. So reaching for and being able to identify a few more emotions that accurately reflect how you feel can really work to your advantage. Now, when it comes to identifying our emotions, there are some introspective questions that we can ask. And if you're ever struggling to figure out how you're feeling, these questions can be a really great guide in helping you to uncover what your true emotion is. The questions are, what emotion am I feeling? That's the first and the best question to always start with. Now, interestingly enough, emotions sit within our body. We do have a physiological response to our emotions, both positive and negative, because that's just the way we're made as human beings. Now, you can also ask yourself, is this a true emotion that I'm feeling? Am I identifying it correctly? Some of my friends like to ask and identify a color to their emotion. If you're angry, that might represent the color of red. Of course, it feels hot, it feels inflammatory, it's kind of like shocking. And so oftentimes our emotions can have a color. A lot of times when we feel happy and joyful, we can associate the color of yellow with that emotion. And that's a very natural thing for us to do, to be able to associate feelings with colors. And while it may not be familiar, it can be something that can help you really put your finger on how you're feeling and why you're feeling that emotion if you start to ask that particular question. Additionally, our emotions can have kind of like a physical response of being either heavy or light within our space as well. If you've ever told a lie and then someone calls you out on that lie, then you know what a heaviness feels like when you're in the space of deceit or manipulation with your emotions. You don't feel very good, and it feels like you're carrying around a weight. And this is how our body responds to the emotion of deceit and manipulation. Likewise, let's say you're offering a service and you're being compassionate and thoughtful. In the contrast of feeling heavy, your body would start to feel light and maybe a little bit more like vibrant and radiant because you're having the emotion of service and compassion and being joyful. It takes a lot of practice, and this isn't something that comes naturally for most of us. So know that as you're starting to identify more of your emotions and make sense of them, that you will get better with time and opportunity. Okay, now when it comes to processing emotions, there really are 4 standard responses. And I want to go through each of them and tell you what they are first, and then I want to provide you with an example of what it might look like if you were to choose the 4 different emotions and the responses with my example. So first and foremost, when we have an emotion, oftentimes people gravitate to resisting. Now, when you resist an emotion, that's like you're trying to white knuckle it. You're fighting against that emotion. You don't want to go there. You're really just digging your heels in hard, and you don't want to have any experience or anything that can like upset you further. So you're really like having this internal tug of war in resisting the emotion that's at play. Avoidance is another response that we choose when we're trying to process an emotion. A lot of times people like to pretend that if they're not feeling something, it will go away. It's like burying our head in the sand. And this is always a lie, my friends. We can't avoid our emotions, all right? If you pretend it's not there, what I can promise you is it may go away temporarily, but then it's going to cycle back around because it wants attention. It needs processed in a healthy way. Another response that people choose is to react to their emotions. Now, oftentimes when people are in a reactionary state, they're responding very quickly, very harshly, and a lot of times their responses are very irrational, okay? They may choose to be on one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum when it comes to their response. And more often than not, there's not any forethought involved, and oftentimes there's a lot of backlash that can come when we just simply choose to react, okay? The fourth and final option that comes when it involves our emotions is to process the emotion. Now, this is, of course, our best choice. It can be uncomfortable because we're inviting ourselves to do some hard work, but it is the most effective choice, and it is the best choice that we can make for our emotional well-being. When we process an emotion, we allow that emotion to sit with us, just kind of like you'd have like a backpack on your shoulder. We kind of recognize that it's there, we own it, we take care of it, we allow it to be present, and then we also embrace it and acknowledge it and just let it kind of stick with us for as long as it needs to before we let it go. And this is how we feel our emotions. Learning how to feel your emotions is a skill, again, that requires lots of practice. But I promise you, it's the very best one available. And you'll be so happy when you learn how to transition into that space and you can make sense of your emotions and you can just let them be. Now, I've given the example of someone passing away here at the top of our slide. And so I want to come back through these 4 choices and give you kind of an example of what that would look like. We're not supposed to feel excited and happy when someone passes away. The typical response is sadness. When we lose someone we love, we typically feel sad. Now, if we're fighting the emotion of sadness, then it's just like, we may refuse to talk about it. We may refuse to allow ourselves to cry and grieve. We may refuse to talk about the person because we're fighting this emotion of sadness, and we believe that our sadness will just go away if we just hold out long enough. And this doesn't work, my friends. As I said before, it will just circle around again. Now, someone who's choosing to avoid sadness may pretend that everything's just fine. They get right back to their regular schedule, they get engaged with their daily tasks, and they pretend everything's just fine, and that they're doing just fine with the reality of someone that they've loved passing away. So when we avoid and pretend that we're not sad, it doesn't serve us well either. Now, another way to process the idea of someone that we love passing away would be reacting and responding, and that's when we see really extreme behaviors. Like maybe someone would decide that they want to go spend a lot of money and they go on a shopping spree because they believe that by purchasing some material items, it's going to make them feel better and it's going to take away that sadness. Another response might be to like crawl into bed and just do nothing at all. They're responding by being paralyzed, frozen, isolated, and they're not thinking about how not processing that emotion has an impact on themselves and on others. So when we respond and we go to any extreme of the spectrum, then we're not truly processing our emotions either. The correct response in knowing that someone has passed away, someone that you love, is to process the emotion. And we really just want that emotion to be with us. We want to carry an extra package of Kleenexes in our purse or in the car and just know that this emotion is going to come over us in waves. We may be fine for a few hours as we're going about our business, and then we may be sitting in a restaurant with a friend and be overcome with grief, just right out of the blue. And that is okay. That's part of processing a difficult emotion. And so knowing that it's going to come and go, it's going to ebb and flow with our activities, is a very natural and a healthy way for us to sit and process the emotion. It's kind of like allowing a ball just to float on top of the water. As we allow that ball to sit there with us as we're in the water and to just be present, then we're not really fighting it. We're not trying to submerge it. We're not trying to get rid of it too quickly by throwing it away, nor are we trying to like react aggressively towards it. When we allow our emotions to just be present and to just be what they are, then we can sit with them and they can be a part of us and a part of our experience. And with time and with some thought work, eventually we'll pass through the difficulty of the emotion and we'll come out on the other side better because of it. We'll develop our skill of empathy. We'll develop our skill of compassion. We'll develop our skill of understanding and better communication because we've allowed that emotion to sit with us and just be present. We also are allowing ourselves simply to be human, and that is a gift that we should be giving ourselves each and every day. Now, I want to offer to you that oftentimes our emotions can be layered. The first emotion that we feel may not always be an accurate reflection of what's really going on underneath the surface. That's why I love this image of the onion, because when we cut into an onion and we look at it, of course, we see lots of layers that make up an entire onion. Knowing that our emotions can be layered is very important because then it allows us to put time on our side. When we allow time to be present on our side in uncovering what we truly feel, we can see things with a better perspective, and we also get a more accurate read on what we're truly feeling. In addition to giving yourself the gift of time, I would invite you to ask yourself the question of why. Why is one of our most valuable questions that we can use. Why do I feel this way? How do I want to feel? What can I do to support myself in this moment? So questions can be very valuable. And then also allow yourself to be meeting yourself with the emotion of compassion and not judgment. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel betrayed. It's okay to feel judgment. It's okay, judgment, I say like maybe you're experiencing judgment towards someone else. It's okay for us to feel frustrated. And more often than not, of course, it's our negative and unpleasant emotions that trigger us most often. We're pretty good to be happy, and we're pretty good with peaceful and joyful and excited. It's more of these difficult, unpleasant emotions that require the best of us when it comes to doing our emotional work. Now, I'm going to give you an example of my daughter, Mia. I love this daughter. She is a bundle of joy. She is such a good girl, and she works really hard to be a good girl and to show up and do A+ work in her life. So with her permission, I asked her if I could share an example. Now, Mia is a high schooler, and interestingly enough, it wasn't long ago that we had a family event occur that fell on Valentine's Day. Knowing that she needed to miss track practice, she went to her coach and said, "Hey, I need to be gone on Valentine's Day, and I need to let you know that I'm going to be absent." I had encouraged her to do this. I said, "Go talk to your coach, get permission. The family activity is more important than your practice for the day." Now, the coach responded to Mia in a really poor fashion. He said some things that were a little bit demeaning. And one of the things was, "How do I know that you're just not skipping to go and make out with boys? It is Valentine's Day." Now, when she came home and shared that that response had come her way from an adult in her learning environment, in her school environment, I was very angry. And I did not feel very good, and I did not have good emotions towards this adult questioning Mia's need and desire to be away from practice. So I had to recognize that anger was my first response, and I allowed that to sit with me for some time. Knowing that I was angry, I kind of gave myself the gift of time in deciding how I wanted to respond and communicate with this teacher and with this track coach. I didn't necessarily want to react because I didn't want to make things bad for Mia by being that, angry parent, but I also knew that this required some attention. So I put time on my side and I asked myself some very thoughtful questions. Why am I so angry? What's really going on here? How do I want to feel about the situation? What will I do next? Because for sure his response to my daughter was totally inappropriate. And Mia is a really good kid. She doesn't seek to do things that would be questionable and going against policy for team sports. So I had to really put those things on my side in sitting with this experience and also sitting with my personal anger. After I took some time and asked myself some reflective questions about the situation, I was able to identify that really what was sitting underneath my anger was disappointment. I was really disappointed in this adult. I was really disappointed with how he treated my daughter. I was really disappointed with his statements and the accusations that he was making toward her. And so it took me some time to uncover this and come into this place. But by processing my emotions before I spoke to him, I was able to handle the situation in a more responsible manner. We were able to have a conversation as two adults should, and he wasn't seeing me all bent out of shape and acting all irrational like I could have been given the situation. So here's one really concrete example for you to take away in how you can process emotion and allow the time and the questions and the compassion to serve you when you might be triggered super quick by that emotional response, your first go-to emotional response. More often than not, there's another emotion sitting below that's more valid than our initial response of anger. And so it was in my situation. So how is it that we can best manage our emotions and process our emotions effectively? I would invite you to do some daily writing. Whenever we get engaged in daily writing, whether it's journaling or what I like to call thought download work, then we're allowing ourselves to put our thoughts onto paper. And when we put our thoughts onto paper, there's lots of benefits. The 3 top benefits that I want to offer you are, first, it allows you to be released from your worries and released from the emotion. When we put our emotions on paper, then we can take a break from entertaining them and babysitting them. And this frees us up to look at things with a new perspective and with new decision-making questions and skills. So allow yourself to sit with that through your writing and then ask yourself how you want to feel about your emotions. Use those reflective questions. And I would invite you also, when you're doing your writing, to do it without any judgment. If you have a lot of harsh words that come out through your writing, know that no one else has to see that. And it's probably going to serve you well if you allow yourself to just put everything down on paper and clear out your mental space. Finally, when we do our writing exercises, it allows us to decide how we want to move forward. When we write something down and we take a break from it and then we come back to it, a lot of times there is more reason, there's a greater level of rationality that can come with us in gaining a new perspective on what's been written. And then you can make a better decision about how you want to move forward with your emotions. When we're willing to do this work, we also are willing to embrace change. And that's how we up-level our lives. That's how we up-level our emotional wellness, is by being willing to sit with things, and when we're ready, then to set them down and move forward. Okay, friends. Now, if you have anything that's been causing you to feel highly triggered because of some situations in your life, and you want to talk about how to better process and manage your emotions, I would invite you to make a coaching appointment. Let's come in this together, and let's look at what's going on, and we'll ask yourself the question of, why do I feel the way I feel? Coaching is a really valuable experience because it allows you to gain a new perspective about your old belief systems. And a lot of times our beliefs are not true. And quite frankly, they can be very, very toxic. As a life coach, I have the opportunity and the gift of being a neutral resource. I'm a neutral party to what's going on in your environment. And that's what allows me to look at things through a different lens and to offer you different options and different opportunities. Coaching also allows you to let go of those old beliefs, create new ways of thinking, and to invite and engage with progress. And that's how we grow and become better versions of ourselves, is by doing the work that's required so that we can embrace change, experiment with change, and then move forward in engaging with change. And that's the really fun part of coaching, is when I start to see traction occur with my clients and they start to do things differently, they start to think differently, and they start to believe differently. And that's the rewarding part of this whole experience. So if you're interested in having a coaching experience, please reach out to me. Now, as promised, I want to offer a comprehensive list of the feelings that are available to us. And you can see from this slide here, the picture on the bottom, there's dozens and dozens of different emotions listed. And this is just one little snapshot of my multiple page handout that I would love to email you. I grabbed this first page as from my resources, just so you could kind of get a quick glance as to how many emotions are truly available to us as human beings. So if you would like to take advantage of this list of feelings, and if you want to enjoy a reading and a worksheet on how to process emotions, you need to send me an email. When you send me an email, that will allow me to know that you're interested, and then I can get you the PDF as well so that you can download that and put it into action in your life. Friends, it has been a pleasure to coach with you and to talk about processing emotions. It's a wonderful experience. I love doing this work. It's really what brings so much joy and happiness to my life. It's also a way that I've been able to grab onto and create real change for my life as well, in creating new and better results within my relationships, within my own personal relationship about how I feel about myself, the trust and the confidence that I feel within myself, and the way that I choose to show up in the world. It's been such a fulfilling and rewarding experience. I would invite you to reach out if you would like to take advantage of this. And I hope that you've really enjoyed this learning segment. Okay, I did promise that I would open it up to Q&A, so I'm going to take this slide down. And I'm going to give you guys just a moment to see if there's any commentary that you want me to entertain or any questions that you'd like to be coached on. So I'm going to hang tight for just a moment. Oh, okay, I see that one of our friends has a question. Let me pull you onto the camera. One moment. And, okay. Let's see. Okay, Stephanie, if you engage the video icon on the bottom of your screen, it will allow you to come on. Okay, how are you, Stephanie?
Good. Thanks, Samantha. Thanks for taking my question.
Yes, you're welcome. I hope you enjoyed our teaching segment.
I did, and I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
So maybe I'll start from the bottom of my list. How do I know when I've successfully processed emotions? It sounds like it's kind of a long, it could be a long time to work through these things. How do I know when I'm done? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right, it can take more than just 10 minutes. And that's the good thing to know. Depending on what the emotion is and the depth of that emotion, it can take a couple of days. And the way that I know that I'm done processing an emotion, it's like kind of like when you let out that really big sigh within your body and you're just like, you feel your body start to relax. You don't feel the need to entertain it any longer. It doesn't sit with you physically anymore. And it's kind of like you're able to release it from your mental space. So it can take a couple of hours, especially if you're actively engaged with it. And then sometimes it might need to linger with you for a day or two. And then all of a sudden you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to be like, oh, that's right. I was feeling shame. I was feeling shame because I made this statement. But that's over with. It's kind of like water under the bridge. And you return to a place of peace and contentment, and it's just not with you any longer. So does that help?
It does. And when I think about maybe some bigger events, we might have those emotions recur. So if we
Yes.
feel like we betrayed at some point, there may be triggers and that emotion will come back and we'll process it,
Yes.
move on, and then it'll come back again and we'll have to process it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a really, really good point. A lot of times we get to engage with certain emotions or even the same emotion multiple times. And this can be because maybe a dynamic within our relationship isn't working well and it needs cleaned up. Or maybe it's because we're engaging with a thought that we think is really useful, but it's actually quite toxic. And so it's not uncommon for us to have the same emotion come around depending on who's in our lives or the environment that we're in. It might be triggered by a work setting or a coworker. And this can be a very, very true statement. But the better you get at recognizing the emotion and knowing that it's come around again, the more quickly you'll be able to navigate through it, and it won't trigger you as heavily. You can be like, oh yeah, this is anxiety. I know anxiety. Come along, we're gonna go take care of our errands today. You can be with me.
Okay.
So knowing that it might be also just part of your natural makeup. Sometimes we have an emotion that we struggle with because it's just part of our chemistry, or it might be part of the story that we've entertained for so long within ourselves that it can be like a familiar friend. Hopefully it's more of a pleasant rather than an unpleasant emotion that's coming around often.
Sure. Let me ask you a different question. It seems like often I think about emotion as out of my control, maybe. Like he did this and so that made me feel this way. Or the flip side of that is I think that I can make this person happy if I do that.
Right. Okay, so we've got two parts to this. And your initial point is that you're wondering that if emotions are out of our control. Are our emotions out of our control because of what other people do? Or can we create and impose an emotion on someone because of what we do?
Yeah, can we influence their emotions? Do we have that power?
Such a good question. So let's go to the first part of this question, and then we'll come to the second, because they really are kind of like two separate experiences. So when it comes to emotions and emotions being out of our control, we really don't have an emotion until we have a thought, first and foremost, okay? So for instance, with this person, I use the example of someone passing away, right? If someone passes away, you're not going to feel sadness until you learn about the event of someone passing away. And then you're going to have an immediate thought that you attach to that event, okay, to that fact. And that is the thought that's going to trigger you. But until you learn about it, you're not going to have an emotional response, which is triggered by your thought. Now, other people do make choices, and they do, they engage in certain behaviors that can trigger us. But we really don't have an emotion until we have a thought about it. Let me give you an example, and this is a really simple example, but I want you to think back to the days when your children were little. And let's say that your 2-year-old is having a tantrum in the grocery store because you're not giving them the candy. They want candy, and so they're having a meltdown. Their behavior is unacceptable, potentially. You're thinking it's unacceptable. And you see this little guy having a meltdown on the middle of the floor in the aisle. And so that's the circumstance. He's crying and flailing about and screaming. And you have a thought, you have a choice in what you want to think about that. First and foremost, you always have that choice of what you want to attach. First off, you may think, this is terrible. My son is out of control and he's causing a scene. So when you have that thought, because of the behavior, it may trigger an emotion of embarrassment. And so you don't really have control over his behavior, but you do have control over what you choose to think. So on the contrast, you're in the store, your son is having a meltdown, he wants the candy, he's on the floor kicking and screaming and crying, and he's doing his thing. You can have the thought of, this is what kids do. He's 2. He's behaving like a very normal 2-year-old. And from that thought, you can choose to feel neutral. You can choose to feel unflustered or accepting not accepting in that you're thrilled, but accepting in this is what 2-year-olds do. You can also feel peace. You could be like, I just love this son. Pick him up off the floor, give him a big hug and kiss. Be like, come on, sweetheart, we've got this. Let's go ahead and just continue on as he's flailing in your arms, right? So even though an unpleasant behavior is occurring, it doesn't have to trigger an unpleasant emotional response. You always get to choose your emotions. Let's do a check and balance really quick and see how you're sitting with that at this point.
I think it works. I'm thinking about an example at work just this week where Alyssa missed her deadline, and like so important to me that we make our deadlines right now. I feel like rated or judged on how well we keep our commitments. And so if a team member who works with me misses that deadline, I just threw up my hands. I couldn't believe she would blow it off, and I didn't understand why, and I was frustrated and angry and wanted to just jump all over her.
Yes.
And I realized I was not in a good position to respond to her at that moment.
Yes. So that is really fantastic that you had that emotional awareness and that self-awareness. So tell me more about the situation. You realized that you were triggered, you were angry, you were frustrated and upset. But before you left your office door and ran her down in the hallway, you chose to do a little check and balance with yourself. Tell me more.
I talked out loud with someone who wasn't involved in it. And I think that was like a release valve in some ways to say, this is driving me nuts. I cannot, to express intent in a safe place, even though I knew that wouldn't be constructive to do it in other scenarios, it was okay with this person to get some ideas about, well, what if, or how could you approach it so that it could come to a conclusion that would be better for both of you.
Okay.
Venting helped.
Okay. All right. So you took an action based on feeling frustrated. You took the action of seeking out a safe coworker where you could just really decompress. You could really just like share all of your thoughts, all of your emotions, and release yourself of holding on to the frustration. And what was the outcome for you, Stephanie, when you ended up speaking with the coworker and taking that action? What did it create for you?
So the pressure had dialed down by the time I went to talk to her, and I found a way to enter the conversation that would allow her to take ownership for what happened and help me understand where she was coming from, because maybe I didn't have all the facts.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually came to a really positive outcome. She acknowledged the miss of the deadline and owned it and went further and then said, and here's how I'm going to fix it, which is, that doesn't always happen.
Right.
Urge to say, and let me fix it for you, or yes, I'll go with you to this downstream group that didn't work with, and we'll do it together. She didn't need that. That wouldn't have been helpful, and it would have added more to what I already had on my long list. It wasn't appropriate for me to do that. For me to not come in and act like I could fix everything was important for me as well as probably for her.
For sure. So the result for you, from what I've gathered, is that you were able to speak to her from a place of being constructive. Yeah. And you released yourself from ownership of the problem. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. The really interesting thing about this thought work and about coaching is it always involves us. We can never create an outcome for someone else, right? She missed the deadline. You had the opportunity to feel an emotion and to take an action. And because of processing it well and the way that you chose to handle it, giving yourself the gift of time on your side, you had a positive result for yourself. Now, in her model, in her experience, certainly she has known that she missed the deadline. And her thought might have been like, I completely blew this. I'm looking really unprofessional. And from there, she may have felt shame and disappointment with herself, or some guilt, which never feels good. In her action, it sounds like she didn't really reach out to you, and she didn't engage. You still had to come to her, but she did take full ownership and then showed up even better because she knew that things weren't functioning well. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I feel like if I'd come maybe with a slightly different approach, I could have piled on that shame and guilt.
Oh, for sure.
And so in that way, I feel like control might not be the right word or own, but influence what I hand to her. I could have carbon copied her and said, she blew it again. And
but
by doing that, I would have handed her a bag of crap that
potentially, you certainly could have shown up with the action of, like you said, projecting statements of shame, projecting statements of guilt, asking questions that were harsh and demeaning. You could have shown up in her space in that way. Now, so let's imagine that you're in her office space and you're berating her, you're demeaning her, and you're angry, and you're acting from this space of anger. Now, she gets to choose how she wants to respond to what you're offering. Some people would be like, oh, Stephanie's having a really bad day. She's really blowing this out of proportion. I wonder what's going on with her, right? And she may not have taken ownership. She may not have engaged in feeling those emotions that you were hoping she would feel, because she gets to attach meaning to your behavior. Does that make sense? Most people do respond. Remember how we talked about we resist and respond? Most people do, but not everyone does. And so if let's pretend that, she really doesn't love this job and she really dislikes working with you, and she doesn't care whether she's there or not. You coming in and having those behaviors with her, she may have been like, well, I can see she's annoyed, but it's not my problem. She could have been very disengaged. And she could have also chosen to take the path of blame, make further excuses, not have ownership. And so your efforts could have spun into an unproductive cycle. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing for us to realize that we really, while we think we have a lot of influence over what other people think and feel, and oftentimes they do attach meaning to what we offer, they ultimately get to decide what they want to think and how they want to feel towards your gesture, towards the action, towards the event.
Logically, I understand that, but I think my default response is to feel a whole lot of responsibility for what weather system, if you will, I'm bringing to a particular context. I feel a whole lot of responsibility when my family gathers to help make sure everybody's enjoying themselves and having a good time and feeling positive about it. Yes. And we can say it's their job to choose whether they have a good time or not, and it is.
Yes.
But I think in a community, we have responsibility to do what we can for a good outcome.
Yes. And I'm not suggesting that there aren't consequences. And I'm not suggesting that there isn't a negative trade-off for not showing up in that way. But the reason you want your family to have a good time at your home is because you want to feel happy about what you've offered them. You want to feel peaceful and joyful about the interactions because you love them, because they're important to you. And your thought is, I love my family members. I want them to feel connected. I want them to, I want my home to be a reflection of community and happiness and connection. And that ultimately supports what your emotional goal is. Have you ever had someone come over and sit in the corner and not engage and play games and eat appetizers?
Yeah, I want to throw a rock at their head.
Okay.
Go up and knock on them and say, hey.
Okay. So, you're striving for this goal and you're setting it up because it matters to you. But not everyone responds and supports what's being offered. It's just because that's our human experience and that's the opportunity that we have. Have you ever have you ever received flowers and not been excited about it? Have you ever received a gift and you're like, I don't like it?
Yeah, I have.
Someone has put a lot of thought. They want to influence your feelings, right? And they present you with a gift. So they're presenting you with a gift, and their thought is, Stephanie's going to love this. This is going to create connection for me, and she's going to think I'm amazing. And they're doing it from an emotion of compassion or maybe excitement, right? And so in their mind, they have this whole thought process of what this gift is going to mean and what they want it to mean. They bring you the gift, and you open the gift, and maybe you don't respond quite how they're hoping. Or maybe the gift really doesn't mean anything to you because you don't feel the same way about that individual.
Right. Our narratives are different about the relationship we have and the reason behind it. And,
so the gift is the neutral thing. And in you receiving the gift and you open the gift, you're like, oh, well, that was nice. Too bad they spent hundreds of dollars on this fur coat. I don't like fur coats.
Okay, I did not get the fur coat, darn it, but yeah.
So your thought, you attach totally different thought to it, even though they're coming in with this whole preconceived notion of what they want it to mean. It's because you get to have your own independent thought. So they're trying to influence, but ultimately you have your own belief to what the gift means. And then from this space of, I don't like fur coats. I wish they wouldn't have spent hundreds of dollars. Your emotion might be indifferent. Mm-hmm. It might be, a feigned excitement, or maybe it's just like reflects disappointment. As much as you're trying to potentially pretend you're happy, it's disappointment.
So this is hard work. It's going to take me a while to get my head around the idea that I don't have as much control as I think I might. My community.
It is very hard work, and we have been socialized and conditioned to think otherwise. If someone comes and brings you a gift and someone brings you an engagement ring and asks for your hand in marriage, they're really trying to influence you. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have that control. You still get to attach the meaning to it, and you get to have your own thoughts and your own emotions as to what that truly means for you. So it is a big process, and it takes lots of practice. But I also want to offer that's where it empowers you to reclaim ownership with your emotional well-being and with your own thoughts and emotions as to how you want to experience the world. Because when we can divide ourselves and we can see things a little more clearer and we can sort them out, then we can make choices that work to our advantage, and it also up-levels our ownership in how we show up within the relationship and how we show up for ourselves.
Yeah, I can see how healthy it is from every angle and liberating. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I appreciate the comment. Thank you so much. Okay, friends, again, if you're interested in taking advantage of that feelings list and of the emotions reading and the worksheet available, drop me a note. Again, I appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much. I know this is big work. I know that oftentimes we truly do believe that we have the power and the ability to influence and control other people's emotions. But when you stop and pause and think about it a little bit longer, our emotions always reside with only ourselves, and their emotions also always reside within themselves. And we truly do not have the ability to dictate or control what they choose to think and feel when the exchange occurs. Okay, come join me again next Wednesday night at 5 o'clock. I'd be so happy to meet with you, and I will have another teaching segment available, and I look forward to taking any questions you have between now and then. Thank you again, and take care.